New paradigms?
New paradigms. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Connie Yowell. I'm the Director of Education at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. And I just want to start off by saying that we do a lot more than give out Genius Awards, even though that's how Bing mentioned us in his introduction. And one of the things that we do is that we do a fair amount of education grant making. 2 years ago, we began to question how effective our grant making was that was really focused on district reform and school reform, instructional improvement. And it was suggested to me that I begin to look at the digital world, and I did sort of kicking and screaming. My heart has always been in social justice and in civil rights and really understanding education as the pathway to that. And I had a lucky opportunity. Will Wright was kind enough to have breakfast with me. And I spent 2.5 hours listening to Will talk about how he creates a game. And it's just following up on Bing's comments. I distinctly remember leaving that meeting and emailing my boss immediately saying, I just met John Dewey. And there is no question in my mind that game developers and the folks who are working on some of these new technologies are the pedagogical theorists of the 21st century. They are the folks who are developing curriculum for our young people. And so in 4 minutes, you can't say much, and so I actually just have one point that I want to make. And that point is that my greatest concern is actually we as adults. My concern is the paradigms that we bring to this work. My concern is that we are at a time of needing dramatic changes and shifts in how we think about learning and the paradigms that we bring to this conversation. So I'm just very curious. Those of you in the room, how many of you, even prior or even after Bing's presentation, could watch somebody play a Madden game and or play it and recognize where learning is happening in that game? A few of you could. Because if you can't understand where learning is happening and see it in the John Madden game, then we're in the wrong paradigm. Right? If you're stuck in conversations about whether or not the Encyclopedia Britannica is better than Wikipedia, then we're in the old paradigm. So part of it is, for me and for us at the Foundation, what matters dramatically at this moment is that we are asking the right questions. Because you can't get to the solution and you can't understand what direction you want to move in unless you're asking the right questions. So if you look at Encyclopedia Britannica and you look at Wikipedia and your questions are about credibility, then you're probably you're concerned about something from the 20th century. If you look at Wikipedia and you say, oh my God, this is going to teach my kid how to be a historian. This is an incredibly different kind of learning and reading. It had fundamentally different reading practices that our young kids are engaged in when they're looking at wikis, when they're looking at blogs, and when they're looking at other things that are on the internet than what they have traditionally done. And so we cannot measure what they're doing or understand the learning that is happening in that context with our old measures, our old paradigms for learning, and frankly, our old understandings of learning, which are based on models of consumption. We're in a time of participation, we're in a time of production, and we're, even importantly as participation and production, we're in a time of networked learning. And I want to say that over and over again. We're in a time of networked learning, where kids are communicating and collaborating with each other. That fundamentally shifts the role of the teacher, fundamentally shifts the role of the adult. If anybody thinks that a classroom with 25 kids in it and a teacher at the front is the paradigm that is the one that we're going to see really effective use of digital media, it is not going to happen. And so we can't be using the same kind of standards and measures or think that we're simply going to move digital media into schools as they currently exist. We will only find out that they have no impact. And then we'll miss one of the most important opportunities for advancing our kids' learning that we have had in over a century. And so I just want to say this I can't say it with enough sort of emotion and importance, that we are in a moment, and that if we ask the wrong questions, if we stick with our questions of the 20th century and hold the new digital media accountable to the things that we've been holding accountable for decades and decades, we're going to miss this opportunity. And so the other point that I want to make is that the commercial industry is driving learning. They are fundamentally driving learning. They have outstripped anything the textbook industry is doing or anyone else. And so what has to significantly shift is the relationship, and I think that's a good thing. What has to shift is how we understand the relationship between public and private. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Connie.